achieved.
So the controversy continues with regard to UFC fighter compensation, UFC fighter pay, how that's impacting the actual matchmaking. And of course, that's all wrapped up in this bundle that is the pandemic right now. Dana White earlier today was on ESPN arguing over fighter compensation. Of course, we're talking about guys like John Jones, Jorge Masvidal, Conor McGregor, Henry Cejudo, all opting to walk away for various reasons. We've talked about this before. But interestingly enough, we see Nate Diaz chiming in on the recent fight announcement actually coming down the pipe today as Kamaru Usman has been announced to defend his welterweight title against Gilbert Burns, who just put on a fantastic upset performance against Tyron Woodley. But a lot of people felt that opportunity should have gone to Masvidal. Masvidal didn't get paid and kind of walked away. And Nate Diaz now chiming in. His Twitter says, his tweet said, "This is what's wrong with people, claiming they're fighters settling for less because they know they're not worth shit." Diaz wrote, "You should have fought the next guy in line, not the guy who would take less because he's told to. That's why no one will remember you guys. This isn't a title fight." So he's suggesting the fact that Masvidal wanted more money, didn't get it. Gilbert Burns came in, took the fight for less money, and he feels that diminishes the title fight. And I kind of see where he's where he's going with this. At the same time, Gilbert Burns is a hell of a difficult fight for Kamaru Usman because he hits hard, he comes forward, he's very good on the ground. A lot of good things going on there. Masvidal would have been a fantastic fight, but that definitely shows you the difference between a legitimate sport and mixed martial arts. Again, please don't come down to me for claiming one is not the other. But one thing we're never going to wind up having happen is, for example, in the NHL, if the Boston Bruins and the St. Louis Blues meet in the Stanley Cup Final, and out of nowhere, the St. Louis Blues say, "Hey, we're not making enough money for this thing, we're pulling out," and the team they beat or another team along the way gets bumped into the Stanley Cup Final. And I know it's not exactly the same as we get title fights all the way down, and a fight that doesn't happen today might happen tomorrow. But nonetheless, it shows you how much the business aspect certainly impacts this sport. And we've seen on multiple occasions in the past where a fight that either is scheduled to happen and gets put off for one reason or another, or doesn't quite come together for one reason or another. For example, Ferguson versus Habib may never transpire, and we'll never find out who actually would have won that matchup. And we could have that here. Kamaru Usman, for whatever reason, might, and Jorge Masvidal, which is a fantastic, very marketable fight right now, may never take place. And it leaves us, wondering what could have happened. So just, I don't know, very interesting to see how this all plays out, and just how compensation and competition and getting the big fights while you're still able to and while you still have marketability is all a key factor in how this operation runs. Welcome back to Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions. Always, I'm your host, Scott Johnson. And on this episode of the show, we are breaking in the upcoming June 13th event, UFC Fight Night 172, transpiring at the UFC Apex Center in Las Vegas, Nevada. I'll be giving you my 5 main card predictions on this episode of the show. All of my preliminary picks, as per usual, will be available at kamikazeoverdrive.net. Now, I'm coming off a show that I went 7-5, sorry. Bit of a disappointment. I needed Nunes to finish in the final fight, and of course she wasn't able to get the job done. She fought beautifully against Felicia Spencer, who put up a hell of a fight. She didn't put up a fight. She took a hell of a beating and kept coming and kept sticking around. But nonetheless, that actually cost us big time in the long run, as we would have really cleaned up had they come through. So the bet pack, of course, the subscription period turns over, so you can save about $20-$30 if you subscribe for the next 2 months. There's a lot of events coming up, and while we're on that note, look at the events that have been posted. So after this event, June 20th is Fight Night 177, Blades versus Volkov. Then you got UFC on ESPN 10 on the 27th, Poirier versus Hooker. And then that massively stacked UFC 251 event with Usman versus Burns, 3 title fights in total leading it off. UFC Fight Island on the 15th, which is the middle of the week. Then we've got July 18th, Figueiredo Benavidez 2 headlining that one as far as I know. From there, we go to July 25th, Whitaker versus Till. Then another Fight Night, Holm versus Aldana on August 1st. August 15th, Miocic versus Cormier 3. And September 19th, we get Nurmagomedov versus Gaethje at UFC 253, I believe it is. I got to double check those numbers. Nonetheless, really a ton of fights going down. The organization really kicking it back into gear. That's quite enjoyable. And on that note, we've got fights to predict, so let's get to our first main card prediction. The opening fight of the main card transpires in the UFC's bantamweight division as a pair of traditional flyweights go head-to-head as the 14-7 Jourdain Espinosa takes on the 11-4 Mark De La Rosa in a division that is absolutely hopping right now and really starting to gain some steam. Once they get a champion in there, it should be very interesting to see how that transpires. Alex Perez picking up a big win last weekend. As far as the betting odds are concerned, Espinosa comes as a favorite at -163, Mark De La Rosa returning at +137, a slight underdog. Now, De La Rosa comes into this matchup as the underdog and having lost 3 in a row. He did have a 2-fight winning streak to kind of build up a little momentum in the organization. He's 2-4 overall, and after losing his debut to Tim Elliott. For Espinosa, he won a Contender Series bout. He beat Eric Shelton in his debut. Just to give you an idea of how bad the flyweight division was at one point as far as falling apart when they were tearing it down. Espinosa had not fought in the UFC. He actually had a fight with De La Rosa in 2019 canceled, and he was already ranked. That's how diminished the division was at one point, and they're building it back up. So he beat Eric Shelton in his debut, but he has since lost back-to-back bouts to Schnell and the aforementioned Alex Perez, both getting submitted. Physically, both guys are the same height. Espinosa will have a 4-inch reach advantage, and he's the younger fighter by 5 years. And as I said, both men are moving up to bantamweight, so they will be heavier by about 10 pounds than they traditionally are. Now, neither man's found any real success against next-level opposition. They've kind of been fodder for the next-level guys. There are 3 combined UFC victories have come over opponents with a combined record of 3 wins and 10 losses. That tells you where they're at. And very well, the loser of this fight could be on their way out. We'll see if they get into the crack. Both guys have high submission win totals. Espinosa, 7 of his 14 wins have come by tap-out. For De La Rosa, 6 of his 11 wins have come by submission. He has won in the UFC. Espinosa yet to secure a UFC tap-out. Now, for De La Rosa, he was submitted by Tim Elliott in his debut, which is at bantamweight. Espinosa, though, has been submitted 4 times in his career, including his back-to-back, his last 2 losses, both by tap-out. So a lot of action for both guys transpiring on the ground. Both good and bad. Now, when you look at Espinosa, of his 7 victories by submission, 4 of them came very early in his career against lesser-known competition. He has just 3 submission victories over his last 14 fights, which tells you he's probably hit a wall as to guys he can take down and tap out. He comes from more of a wrestling background, and, well, they can use superior control and ability to maintain that over an opponent to help shut them down. At the same time, once you get guys that are just better at defending that and just better jiu-jitsu players and grapplers, it becomes more difficult to pick up those victories. Now, for De La Rosa, he's a jiu-jitsu black belt. He has serviceable striking, but he needs to close the distance really, and he's at his best when he can take his opponent down. No questions asked. His recent losses have come against opponents who can defend the takedown and force him to straight work on the feet, and then they can simply outwork him, out-volume him, out-impact him. De La Rosa, though, his striking is far from completely useless. He will throw some decent counter strikes. He's got some nice low kicks, including some low calf kicks. He'll counter strike as well. When he fought Joby Sanchez in one of his UFC victories, every time Sanchez came forward, he was kind of a guy using some speed and striking base. We saw a nice left hook, right uppercut counter that Sanchez was working in with relative success. Or, sorry, my apologies. De La Rosa was working with relative success. He would also land maybe that left hook and then just to fire a barrage off and really back him up. That low calf kick I previously mentioned against Sanchez had a lot of success as well, took away some of his movement. And overall, he's landing some solid strikes, but also eating some strikes. He also has been hurt multiple times. Kai Kara France hurt him. Paiva finished him. He wears his damage throughout fights. And while he's still in the bout throwing away, it definitely shows that he is taking some of his opponent's best offense. Now, for Espinosa, he's relatively fast. He moves a lot in and out. And one of the big questions is can he maintain that movement effectively through all 3 rounds? And one of the things that jumps off the page at me is in 8 decisions, he's 5-3, which includes a split decision victory, which tells you maybe he can't maintain that type of pace for the full fight, and it starts to become less effective, and he becomes less effective. He's not a high-volume striker, and one of the big questions is when he's moving backwards, how effective can he be? Now, some of his positive weapons, he's got a good left jab. He pops in and out and lands it. He'll throw some good low kicks, switching stances and throwing those kicks from both sides, which is a nice, effective tool to have. Just generally speaking, he likes to land and avoid his opponent's offense. He'll step in with a hard right hand, but he holds his hands a little bit low, and I don't like that. And as the fight advances, he starts to slow down a little bit. His opponent starts to time him a little bit and get used to him. He becomes more predictable, and he starts to eat more and more offense. And now, as far as his wrestling is concerned, he's got a very quick level change on the outside. He'll throw a nice double leg. Not a ton of top control. We haven't seen him take guys down and really lay on top of them, sit on top of them for prolonged periods of time. It's more like a takedown, a scramble, and usually back up to the feet. Now, that being said, he's also got himself into some trouble. Against Matt Schnell, he shot in for a takedown, got caught, and a couple submissions, eventually tapped out with a triangle. Against Perez, he got taken down and choked out almost immediately with an arm triangle. So he's had some issues on the ground. Now, when you look at the way these 2 guys stack up, for De La Rosa, he appears to throw more purposeful and consistent striking. Less flashy than Espinosa, but certainly more functional. Espinosa's going to come in there and try and throw some big stuff at you and really catch you. And he might land 1 or 2, but it seems like De La Rosa is going to throw back 3 or 4 in his direction. I also think De La Rosa is the more capable grappler, which is a problem for Espinosa, both landing takedowns and giving them up, especially with his submission history. So that tells you that, for the most part, you're not going to see Espinosa find a lot of success taking him down, at least early, before he gets tired, because De La Rosa is going to attack off his back and scramble and could get some good positions out of it. And the same thing, if De La Rosa gets offensive, is able to get in on the hips of Espinosa possibly timing coming forward, he can land a takedown of his own. Espinosa very well could win this fight by bouncing around the cage, avoiding him for 3 rounds, and really picking away at him, using his speed to really, and not a ton of volume, but just speed to edge out the overall exchanges. But the way I look at it is he doesn't have that big type of power to knock his opponent out. He hasn't shown a lot of, he's not going to really put a beating on De La Rosa over a full 15 minutes. He's just going to more pick away at him. And one thing I don't like is that extra weight that he's going to be carrying at bantamweight might not bode well for a guy who uses all that movement, and it might actually slow him down quicker. For De La Rosa, he has lost 3 in a row. And you know how we saw with Cody Garbrandt, how effective fighters can be and how much pressure it puts on them having lost 3 in a row, because they know that 4th loss, it's over. And you look at the guys he's faced, Raulian Paiva, who's a very good fighter, very underrated. Watch for him in the near future. And then potential contenders in Alex Perez and Kai Kara France. So this would definitely seem as a sizable step back in those compared to those fights. And this is a must-win. There's a lot of pressure. We're undervaluing him. He's getting a better, more winnable fight, even though he is still the underdog in this matchup. I think when it comes right down to it, De La Rosa lands better strikes. He threatens a few takedowns. He might even land a couple, especially if Jourdain Espinosa starts to slow down. And my prediction is Mark De La Rosa to defeat Jourdain Espinosa by decision. Fight number 2 in the main card goes down in the UFC's featherweight divisions. The 20-7 Andre Fili takes on the 10-2 Charles Air Jordan. Now, currently, Fili coming in as the 1-225 favorite. The return on Jordan is plus 187. Now, Fili's coming off a very tough loss to Sodiq Yusuff. It was a very competitive fight. A lot of people thought it could have gone one way or the other. He fought fairly well against a very tough opponent. He had won back-to-back bouts against Shayman Moraes and Miles Jury prior to that, and 4 of 5 with his only loss in that stretch. Very controversial split decision loss to Michael Johnson. He's fought very well over his last little bit. For Jordan, he scored a TKO victory over Doo Ho Choi in his last fight in enemy territory in Korea. He lost his debut to Des Green, also fighting in Des Green's hometown, but he's a winner of 5 of his last 6. Fili, 2 inches taller, of a 5-inch reach advantage, and Jordan is the younger fighter by 5 years. Now, looking at the Canadian first, he is a Muay Thai-based fighter, throws a variety of kicks. He has a relatively active jab. He switches stances quite frequently. He'll mix in some spinning offense. Very flashy, or at least wants to be very flashy with his offense. He throws some decent combinations. He's got a good uppercut, good hand speed overall. He'll work the body as well. But he opens himself up quite a lot defensively when he throws those big shots. He winds up a little with some of his bigger offense. He likes this jumping knee where once in a while he'll throw it fluidly, but more often than not he seems to get halfway through it and realize, I don't want to throw it anymore, and he pulls himself back, and it's just you've committed to something. And we saw what happened with Andrei Arlovsky that time against Fedor Emelianenko way back in the day. You get caught in the air going for a partial jumping knee, you get yourself knocked out. The other thing I don't like is he gets his feet out of position. He seems very unsteady at times, not just from fatigue, just the way he throws offense. He just isn't comfortable where he's when he's throwing it. I don't like the way defensively he shells up under fire. He allows his opponent to really draw out their attack and mix 3 or 4 more shots in. Against Doo Ho Choi, he was hurt in round 1. He got hurt by Des Green as well in that matchup. Now, I will say he looked much better in the Choi fight. He probably lost the first round, but he looks much better. He was more comfortable. He's more aggressive. And he started to find more and more success as that fight advanced, and he got more aggressive, and Choi backed off a little bit. Now, late in round 1 is where that fight really changed. He dropped Choi after spending most of the fight defensive. He finished him with a short left hand in the second round when he got, at the very end of the second round during a last-second exchange. Now, he has had some issues with his takedown defense. He gave up 4 takedowns against Des Green. He has a jiu-jitsu brown belt, so it's not like he's completely out of his depth on the ground, but just 3 wins by submission, and he's 0-2 on the scorecard, so it shows you how much he depends on knocking opponents out. Now, for Fili, he's been up and down over his UFC career, especially early on. Never able to put together back-to-back wins. Now he's found a lot of success. He's really matured and moved into his own, and a lot of people feel he has the ability to make a run at that top 10 and go from there. His volume has really improved. Over his first 8 UFC fights, he averaged 39 significant strikes per fight. Over his current 6-fight winning streak, he's averaged 57, so almost 20 strikes more average. Plus, he's mixed in 14 takedowns, so he's augmenting his striking offense, and that's very solid. And, of course, he's been doing it against better competition as well. Now, during that span, both of his losses saw him throw a little bit less, and while he landed some takedowns, it simply was not enough to make up for it. He throws an excellent long lead jab. That is one of his best weapons. If he can pick away at his opponent, that's gonna set him up for a chance to victory. He's got some nice hard body kicks. He rocked Shayman Moraes during the exchange with the right head kick, and a short counter right hook, kind of a shovel hook, put him down for the finish in that matchup. Now, against Yusuff, his jab, again, very effective. He will have the reach advantage in this fight as well, even more so than he did in that fight, so something I expect to see him go. I love the way he throws his shoulders, little fakes and feints there to try and draw his opponent's offense out, gives them different looks. He'll switch stances, and if he goes southpaw, he can do it fairly well. it can create some new looks for his opponent that they're not ready for, might not even train for, especially if he does it just seamlessly during the fight. Now, at the same time, he will get hit. If he steps into the pocket, he'll absorb some damage. He got buckled by Sadiq during an exchange. Now, at the same time, he hurt Sadiq a couple times, he's been a wrecking machine in the UFC, and the thing I like is his counter takedowns. He's very good at getting in on the hips and really driving through, and he melds everything together, and that's why he's become so much more effective lately. His level changes, and his clinch and just regular shot takedowns are very good. They change the flow of the fight. His entries are good. He doesn't have the greatest top control, which is something he wants to work on, but again, that will come with time, especially working with Team Alpha Male. Now, Fili will slow down a little bit as the fight goes, but he's a dog. He'll keep going. He'll wear some damage. In round 3 against Sadiq, he kept coming, and he actually won that third round. A lot of people thought that might have been enough for him to win or steal a split decision or something very close. In this matchup, I feel he's the sharper striker. He's the longer striker. He's the more calculated striker. And on top of all of that, he has his wrestling in his back pocket to threaten his opponent with. Jourdain has some power. He's got lots of different techniques he likes to throw, but he's very reckless. He's very wild at times. He overextends. His foot positioning is bad, which is going to put him in some bad spots with some wasted motion where he'll get either taken down or just countered, or his offense will be avoided. I would say the Canadian probably needs a knockout in this matchup or to hurt Fili on multiple occasions to get rounds in his book. Look for Fili to use that jab and just pick away at him over and over again. And then if Jourdain pushes forward looking to engage, Fili should close the distance and change levels for a takedown. Ultimately, good fight. I think this will be relatively entertaining, but my prediction is Andre Fili to defeat Charles Jourdain by decision. Moving back down to the bantamweight division, we have former flyweight title contender, the 13-5 Ray Borg, taking on the 10-4 Merab Dvalishvili. Now, currently, Dvalishvili a heavy underdog at minus 350. Borg, the return, at plus 275. Now, this is a very odd fight when you really look things over. Borg just fought and lost to Ricky Simón. It was a close fight, but I think he lost definitively. He also lost to Casey Kenny. Dvalishvili just beat Casey Kenny fairly handily, and if you want to go back to quite a while ago, Dvalishvili beat Ricky Simón pretty much from the start of the fight to the end. Simón had his moments before Simón got a very controversial submission ruled TKO at the end of the fight. So it doesn't make a lot of sense for Borg to be getting this fight. But again, maybe they're running short on fighters who are willing to take fights and they get what they can going forward. Now, Borg is coming off a split decision loss to the aforementioned Simón. Seemed a little more definitive than the split decision would suggest, which ended his 2-fight winning streak. For Dvalishvili, he has won 3 fights in a row after an 0-2 start. Wide victories over Kenny, Katona, and Terrion Ware prior to that. Physically, Dvalishvili, the more natural and a very big bantamweight. 2 inches taller, 5-inch reach advantage. He is 2 years older than Borg. And it's worth noting that Simón and Merab are pretty much the same size, and Borg seemed undersized in that matchup, so he will here as well. Now, Borg seems like he wants to stay at bantamweight, but he's one of these guys I'm like, just get it figured out. Because he immediately goes into flyweight and can contend. Ray Borg, to me, is one of those guys, if he goes into flyweight, makes the weight, he wins one high-profile fight, he can fight for the title. I would have no problem with that. I, in fact, would love to see him, especially the way he looked in his last fight against Ricky Simón. If he can get down to flyweight, win one matchup, could you imagine Borg versus Perez, winner of that gets the winner of Figueiredo and Benavidez for the title? It'd be awesome. But it's just not happening right now. He's fighting in a 1-month turnaround. Just saw Kelleher do that. He looked good, but he lost his matchup too as an underdog. Now, Borg's a very good grappler, dangerous submission fighter, but he's struggled to implement it at bantamweight. He's 0-2. Went 0-2 on takedowns against Simón. Just cannot out-muscle guys, can't out-scramble them or position them. Just has a difficult time controlling them. Against Simón, he gave up 7 takedowns. And again, he was able to scramble his way into some better spots in that fight, but really didn't amount much offense. And it's almost like, he has a vaunted guillotine, very dangerous guillotine, but... And good rear naked choke as well. He's got a good choke overall. But he doesn't seem very interested in going for them. Just more get up, get off my back, get back to my feet. And he just hasn't had that grappling prowess that he's usually has. Now, that being said, his striking against Ricky Simón looked the best it's ever looked. He looked fantastic. He was throwing big combinations with significant pop and just looked very sharp on the feet. He threw body shots, hard combinations, had a nice uppercut, threw some nice counter striking in there as well. He's bouncing around. He does need to let his hands go a little bit. His corner was telling him in that fight, less power, more volume. Don't have to touch him all the time. 1, 2, 3, some lighter shots that are going to pick away at him, and then throw some power. But stay active. That's how you win fights with just striking. Stay more active, pick away, mix in your power shots. Don't have to throw everything with power. Now, the big thing in that fight is he wasn't able to take out Ricky Simón. Maybe he won't be able to at flyweight again. I'd love to see those hands work at flyweight. He wasn't able to do it at bantamweight. He only landed 47 significant strikes in that fight, and again, he's not as effective when he can't augment that offense with his grappling. Now, Dvalishvili is an absolute wrestling machine. He ran over Casey Kenny with 12 takedowns, and Kenny's showing himself to be very capable at bantamweight. In fact, I wouldn't even mind seeing those two rematches. Kenny seemed just a little bit out of his league there. He's made some improvements. 5 takedowns versus Katona, 7 versus Ariane Ware. He's averaged 7.8 takedowns per fight in his UFC career. I think the low point's been 5 in a fight. He throws decent volume on the feet, left jab, variety of kicks, front kick to the body. He'll throw some spinning attacks. He gets his opponent to feel comfortable and thinking, oh, we're striking now, and then he changes levels. He shot a very low single against Casey Kenny. Wasn't successful, but then when he came up, he landed some strikes on the break, and that gets them thinking about, hey, what do I have to defend against here? There's more than just strikes coming my way, and that's very it can be a very successful tool to have in your back pocket. He's got some very good level changes very quick, so good at getting in and getting low on his opponents and driving through. Now, he has had control issues on the mat, not able to really keep his opponents pinned on the mat for prolonged periods of time. Did a decent job against Katona and Ariane Ware, but again, Kenny was able to get up fairly quickly in that matchup, and while he couldn't maintain a lot of separation, Dvalishvili kept on him. He wasn't cementing those takedowns with prolonged top control. If he does get on top, he's got some Donkey Kong type ground and pound to just kind of reel back and just let it go, not really focusing on maintaining control. Now, in that matchup, Kenny was wearing down against Dvalishvili, who was constantly pushing forward. Now, they were fighting at altitude. Dvalishvili's a cardio machine. Kenny's no slouch, but I think Kenny just wore out because of the altitude there. Dvalishvili's striking is a little bit wild to me, and he leaves himself open, and I like that Borg's striking looks so much better. Very impressed. And but it needs to look better again here. He needs to be more active, more impactful, and more just more to the point. I would say he probably needs a knockout here because he doesn't throw enough volume to make up for the fact that Dvalishvili is going to take him down over and over and over again. Merab pushes a crazy pace. He's going to force Borg to work extremely hard. Borg will scramble, but I think while he scrambles out his way of the early takedowns, Merab will eventually just wear him down. The takedowns, I would say, from Merab will be anywhere from 6 to 10 takedown completions. He'll land some decent volume on the feet, and you'll have Borg trying to make up for it with just offensive striking. No takedowns to be had. He'll need a massive uptick from what he traditionally puts out, or a knockout. I don't think he gets either. My prediction is Merab Dvalishvili to defeat Ray Borg by decision. In the co-main event of the evening, we're in the UFC's middleweight division for a bout that has a little more spice on it this time around, as the Italian Dream or Italian Stallion, I'm not sure which one he goes by these days, the 14-4-1 Marvin Vettori finally gets his hands on the 9-2 baby K Karl Roberson. Currently Vettori the slight favorite, actually not slight, minus 220. Roberson returning at plus 180. Now this is a very interesting fight. It was rebooked from UFC Fight Night 171, I believe. There's a ton of emotion now charged in this matchup, as we saw Vettori freak out when Roberson pulled out of the fight last second. I believe he had to go to the hospital. That was one of the first, I think it was the first bout post or during the pandemic attempted card by the UFC that was successful. Roberson pulled out, Vettori screaming at him in the hotel lobby, and just Roberson kind of smiling back and just very heated. So very much more spice on this matchup than there was prior to when it was first supposed to transpire. Now, there's definitely room for these two in the middleweight division. The winner of this fight gets a massive, massive opportunity to step up and work their way, not into contention, but to get that next level shot. And you got to look at Vettori. He has a split decision loss against the current champion. If he can win this matchup and maybe pulls off another big win or two, he starts calling for a title fight based on what he's done already. It's not a sexy fight, but it's still a matchup that could happen. Vettori's won back-to-back matchups against Andrew Sanchez and Cesar Fajeda. He had lost a split decision fight, as I said, to the champion. He's 4-2-1 in the UFC. For Roberson, he has won back-to-back matchups against talented prospects in Turman and Kopylov. He lost a light heavyweight bout to Glover Teixeira that he nearly finished him in, and overall he's 4-2 in the promotion as well. Roberson 1 inch taller, same reach. Vettori is the younger man by 3 years. Now, Roberson's a capable kickboxer, but the start of his UFC career has really been dictated by a much different trend. He went 2-2 in fights that are decided by grappling, both submissions and takedowns. He's had 2 fights that he lost because of getting submitted. That's worth noting as well. He did earn a split decision win against Turman, who's a fairly good grappler in his own right. Outlanded on 50-25, but he gave up 4 takedowns. So that shows that he can give up takedowns and still win fights. Versus Kopylov, he scored a submission win, very impressive, but it was arguably his most complete performance, as he did an absolutely, I was going to say astronomical, but at least a lot of damage with his low kicks that took away his base and eventually led to that submission victory. Now, you look at Roberson here and how he matches up with Vettori. Vettori's takedown defense is very good, and you wonder, can Roberson find any success against that takedown defense and get involved in this fight? Now, with the smaller cage, Vettori might have less opportunities to move around and avoid getting clinched up or getting taken down. But again, Vettori lost his early fight against Antonio Carlos Jr., giving up 4 takedowns on 13 attempts. Since that, his opponents are combined 0 for 10. Including Andrew Sanchez, a pretty good wrestler, who went over 2, Fajeda, who's over 5, who's jiu-jitsu and wrestling, who's got good jiu-jitsu. Just generally speaking, he's done a good job of shutting down ground-oriented opponents. Vettori actually is a very good grappler in his own right. He has submission victories over Alberto Uda and Igor Araujo, both jiu-jitsu black belts. 8 of his 14 career wins have come by submission. He's proven himself good on the ground, and he actually could find the edge there, especially if Roberson starts to tire or makes some mistakes and gets put on his back. Vettori's a very functional striker, stays active while he lacks that big knockout power that's going to put guys down. He doesn't have the numbers to suggest he's going to put guys out. He still busts up his opponents with a consistent, in-your-face offense. His volume has steadily improved over his current streak, 50 to 60 significant strikes, which is solid. But over his last 2 matchups, 78 and 85 significant strikes. So you see he's trending in the right direction. Now, Roberson has come close to those. Has never come close to those totals. He usually lands between 35 and 50 significant strikes at the top end of his offense. Now, Roberson should have the edge in technical skill and possibly power, but Vettori's edge in volume, consistency, and overall durability are going to be significant. I give Vettori the edge in offensive and defensive grappling/wrestling, which takes away a key aspect of Roberson's offensive path to victory. Roberson needs to hurt him early and often, but I think he's going to be able to do it. I don't think he's going to be able to take him down. I think he's just going to be second best in a lot of situations here. Even though his striking looks so good in his last fight, I think Vettori can just move forward and really be in his face and wear him out. Vettori lands more, keeps engaging, pulls away in rounds 2 and 3, and really cements this fight. My prediction is Marvin Vettori to defeat Karl Roberson by decision. We move now to the main event of the evening. We're in the UFC's flyweight division as the former title challenger, the Evil One Jessica Eye, 15-7-0, takes on the former strawweight competitor, the 8-1-1 Cynthia Calvillo. Currently, the former title challenger Jessica Eye and Cynthia Calvillo are locked at an even pick'em -110 on either side. Now, this is a post-title fight. Looking at Eye, she's coming off that post-title fight scenario against Viviana Araujo where she won. In a pretty good matchup, good showing for herself. She's 4-1 at flyweight with her only loss against Shevchenko. This is a very good division for her. For Calvillo, she fought to a draw against Marina Rodriguez. She's 5-1-1 in the UFC. Her only loss to former strawweight champion Carla Esparza, but she has missed weight in 2 of her last 3 fights. I actually missed weight in her last matchup as well, but Calvillo has missed weight in 2 of her last 3 fights. Physically, 2 inches taller. She'll have a 2-inch reach advantage as well, and she's the older fighter by a year. Now, Calvillo seemed like she's moving up for a lack of better options. As I said, she's missed weight badly in 2 of her last 3 fights. She came in against Rodriguez at 120.5, so missing the mark by 4.5 pounds, which is pretty excessive. Now, when you look at this fight, it plays out like a grappler versus striker comparison. Both girls are not lost in the other girl's realm, but ultimately, wants this fight standing, and Calvillo wants to utilize her ground game to victory. Now, when you look at Calvillo's fight against Marina Rodriguez, she landed 3 takedowns, landed 2 against Bontello, 2 against Calderwood, 1 each against Gonzalez and Cooper. She has 3 UFC submission victories, been very effective on the ground game in her victories. When she lost to Carla Esparza, just 1 takedown while she gave up 2. She lost a decision. Against Courtney Casey, though, 0 takedowns landed, I believe, on 6 attempts, and she won a decision, so it shows she can win a fight without landing any takedowns. She comes from a wrestling and jiu-jitsu background. She's worked at Team Alpha Male, but more recently she's been training with Tiger Muay Thai in an attempt to really round out her striking, which has been a key secondary aspect of her game, where if she can bring it up to par, it will certainly help her overall game. Against Rodriguez, she had some good level changes, but she got stuffed in a couple of those fights. On a couple of those shots, but she was able to power through for the most part. She used a nice ankle pick to put her on the ground, but couldn't hold her down. Now, one thing that Calvillo is very good. She's a good scrambler. She's good from top position. She'll look for submissions or ground and pound. But again, controlling from top position and maintaining that control is essential to her success. Now, as I said, she went 0 for 6 against Courtney Casey, who is a bigger, stronger girl for the division, and she had trouble with the range of Casey, who is just 1 inch taller than and 1 inch longer than I, so there could be some similarities there. We saw Calvillo really struggling to close the gap at times in that fight with her striking. She circles a lot. She'll step forward, but she's a little bit clunky at times. Not a lot of pop in her hands. Her hooks tend to be a little bit wide. Her combinations just get a little bit out there and not as defensively sound. She did beat Casey on the feet with her general activity, but certainly not with her crispness. And Casey has a bad track record of going outside the first round and not winning. Now, against Rodriguez, a very good striker who's been vulnerable to takedowns, she was getting hurt every time Rodriguez backed her up. She was concerned about the knees that Rodriguez was throwing. She was very hesitant to shoot at times and really struggled from that spot. Now, you look at Ai, she's actually utilized more grappling since coming down to flyweight than she was able to bantamweight. 4 takedowns over her first 2 flyweight bouts. Now, when she fought Araujo, she got taken down off of a kick early, but she did an excellent job of defending, and she got back up extremely quickly. Now, what she did is use this knee tie technique, where she was able to kind of really lock up her opponent and maintained a lot of distance with that knee in separation when she was on her back, framed away, created separation, scooted her hips back, and got back to her feet. That will be essential to her success in this fight here. She's a solid striker when she's on her feet. Not a lot of punching power, but fairly technical. She was working in more kicks and knees against Araujo, especially once she realized she could stay on her feet against Araujo or get back up if taken down. When Araujo came forward, she used a lot of movement, and Ai countered as much as possible, and it kept Vivienne from getting really comfortable. We saw Ai beat up the legs, which will be very important here. And once those legs started to get tired, it really impacted her ability to close the gap. Now, Ai's volume at flyweight has been much better. 98 against Araujo, 81 against Chookagian, 67 against Jessie Rose Clark. Very good overall output, and that's key as well. Now, she also has a huge experience advantage. 23 total fights is just 10 for Calvillo, so that's big. And a career of going the distance in matchups will aid Ai knowing how to fight longer matchups. Calvillo has gone the distance in longer bouts, but she has also won a lot of her fights by inside the distance. Calvillo will win moments in this fight. She'll probably land some takedowns. She'll probably score a takedown and scramble, not maintain it, but certainly get on top. But she'll get discouraged, I think, especially when she can't get in and maintain that control. Look for Ai to land counters and straight punches, knees down the middle. Leg kicks will slow her down. Her size will maximize her ability to shut down the takedowns. Ai will have more success defending takedowns as the fight advances, landing strikes as the fight goes. Some concern about the size of the cage, giving Calvillo the chance to close that gap. But I will survive that early and just ultimately pick her apart. And my prediction is Jessica Ai to defeat Cynthia Calvillo by decision. So those are my 5 main card predictions for UFC Fight Night 172. All of my preliminary picks will be available at kamikazeoverdrive.net. I will post them throughout the week along with the bet packs, which you can purchase for $15. Again, coming off one which basically came down to the main event. We didn't get the finish, therefore we didn't get the big victory. Nonetheless, we'll keep plugging away. Very much looking forward to this card. It's a nice little card. Nothing flashy, but still some serviceable, entertaining matchups top to bottom. So please check them out. As you can follow me on Twitter at KO_predictions if you want to follow me on Fight Night, or during the week to get all my predictions as soon as they come out. As always, I greatly appreciate you tuning in and listening to the show. Take care, folks, and talk to you soon.